Hi everyone, and welcome to the Medcurity podcast. I'm your host, Mel, and on this episode, we're covering one of the most talked about but misunderstood shifts in our industry, the evolution of AI in healthcare. Joining us today, we have three CEOs at the forefront of the shift: Joe Gellatly of Medcurity, Tim Maxwell of Karuna Care Services, and Brandon Tanner of Omniscia AI. Before we dive in, I'll let them introduce themselves. Joe, how about we start with you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mel. Thanks for kicking us off. Again, I'm Joe Gellatly and Mel's colleague here at Medcurity. And so it's certainly going to be a conversation right in our focus area right now is moving forward quickly, but with guardrails, right? So how do we get healthcare to be taking advantage of this innovation and running forward quickly without jeopardizing security or privacy or patient health? So it's a big focus. We're learning more every day, but look forward to the conversation.
Great. How about you, Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Mel. And Joe, thanks for having me on. Tim Maxwell. So I am connecting to you guys from Erie, Colorado, with the Karuna Care Services. We are a organization that provides primarily residential supports for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Also a founder of a EHR in that specific space, Briscoe.
Cool. Well, thanks, Mel and Joe, for having me on. And Tim, good to meet you. Brandon Tanner with Omniscia AI. We are a software as a service company with a digital human emulation platform, which that basically means we can digitally emulate an organization's best subject matter expert or experts, primarily from a conversational perspective. That's where we come from. It doesn't mean we're replacing humans. It's just an augmentation to help them be more efficient, as well as provide a more fluid experience for employees, customers, members, patients, etc.
Speaking of efficient and adopting AI, what are the models and AI tools that you use today the most often? What are your go-tos, Brandon?
My go-tos is Gemini, to be honest. It's one of I really enjoy like even the live Gemini piece component to it. I actually created some monsters when I was with my daughter in Arizona recently for a volleyball tournament with my aunt and uncle who are her elderly. Showed them how to use it and actually put it in listen mode. And then they could use it like if they had someone come over to their house that's working on their stereo system or their pool or hot tub. And then when the person would leave, they could actually have a conversation with Gemini about details and they could tell them additional stuff on it. It also worked for things like I know when they're talking to, like they're doing telehealth, if you will, and they're talking to someone about a medication, as an example, they'll have it in listen only mode and then they're able to conversate with it after that. So it's kind of an interesting use case. So they've gotten pretty dependent on it pretty quick.
Gemini is my go-to.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. All of us use different ones, but Gemini is my go-to.
Yeah, I like it a little better than ChatGPT because it's a little less verbose and it's a little
Yeah.
more to the point, and that may be a personality thing.
Yeah, I agree. I've used Copilot, I've used Grok, I use all of them, and
hmm
Gemini is still my number one.
Yeah. I know our
Yeah.
team uses them depending on our team. They're more advanced than me. I'm not technical. They use, depending on what they're doing, they use those specific ones, whether it's Grok or, if we're doing calculations and formulas and stuff like that. They know which ones to use when. Not
Great
me.
for the tedious task.
Yeah.
What about you, Joe?
Well, I think my ChatGPT is efficient now and concise because it's scared of me. Every time I ask it a question, it's like, "Don't worry," and it says something like cheesy, like Joe style. Here's the bottom line, and it just gives me like the punchy, quick answers because I've yelled at it enough for just please just give me the bottom line on this. So now I have to prompt it to get it to talk more. But what a brilliant use case, Brandon. That's really interesting to hear about the way that it can support like our elderly parents and help them
Yeah.
give them context and
Yeah, and I think I won't be surprised if they don't take it in with them, and I don't know the ramifications of that, but I could easily see them taking it into a visit if they had to go in. But I know they do a lot of telehealth, and for them, it's a really interesting use case, and then they can refer back to it to go, what are the symptoms of that? What am I not supposed to do? And and obviously it has access, broader access than just there. And I know there's a lot of controversy over it giving, health information and stuff like that, but they're going to use it.
Yeah.
Like, and as
Well,
long
and
as they're
everyone
the
is
ones
using
using it.
WebMD
Yeah.
too, so instead of
Yeah.
WebMD, what do they use?
Yeah.
And at
Yeah.
least it cites the sources and maybe gives some context too as to why it
Yeah.
might.
And they're the ones choosing to use it versus it
Yeah.
being
right.
supplied by the healthcare provider. So I think that probably is a bonus, right? If you look at like cut straight to the chase of liability and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mom was headed into a surgery, and she did her first ChatGPT prompt was what to expect. She had
Yeah.
various surgeons involved, various doctors. She said, I don't know what's going to happen afterwards. Am I laid up for 2 weeks or 2 months or 6 months? And it gave her just this nice what to expect answer. And she referenced it over and over again, told her friends, got all these others, like you said, monster super users in her community. But yeah, so that helpful guide, I think we see it in our roles, maybe in leading development or leading teams, where ChatGPT for me is also a very good strategic partner, right? Bounce ideas off of it, help it set roadmap ideas, look at the competition, say, what are we missing in this? On the daily use, I would say ChatGPT is pretty frequent in conversations with it, but I'm bouncing between that and Claude and Grok. So Grok is so good with the real time because of the X feed. I can get the pulse on something that's happening today. And there's so much happening today, each day right now, right? And then I use ChatGPT to write prompts for Codex or Claude Code. So it helps me in the more advanced work that AI is running, or agents are doing. I tend to have an AI write the prompt for the coding engine. That's been working pretty effectively too. So it's a couple of daily use for me.
Yeah, I like ChatGPT for like LinkedIn posts and stuff. I think it does a better job than Gemini at stuff like that. And I do, to your point, Joe, I like to bounce different things off of each one of them to see what the response is. Kind of your point, like Claude, like what's happened on X, what's happened on Google. You can kind of see what kind of the perspective is, if you will, or what the difference is. And doesn't make it right or wrong, just means like, is it consistent or is it coming back with something different based on its training and its knowledge, right?
Absolutely.
Pit them against each other. And if they're competitors, be like, well, this is what Grok says, And
Yeah.
It's great. It's interesting to hear how everyone uses and what tools they prefer and why, and kind of day-to-day like use cases. What about you, Tim? What do you use it for?
It was funny. Joe and I hadn't compared notes, but as he was talking, I was like, "God, you're just really describing almost exactly my day-to-day AI use." It definitely started out predominantly Chat GPT, and still, I think maybe just because it was kind of one of the first ones I really got into. That's going to be my go-to for anything kind of personal or just random. I'm there, and then also I love like the project component within ChatGPT. I've got literally hundreds of projects, which are really just kind of themes that I sort of conceptualize information in. Um, but more recently, I've been using Claude. I've become a huge Anthropic fan, and it was interesting, Joe, what you were saying. I thought I was really clever because I used ChatGPT for prompts for Claude, specifically in Claude Code as well. I was like, "Haha, I've nailed something." And Joe's like, "Yeah, I've been doing that for like
You're
8 months,
clever.
man."
You and I are both clever, Tim. Keep that label.
So, yeah, no, but I mean, day to day with ChatGPT, it's great. I mean, who doesn't want to, ask an AI a question and have it tell you the answer, but also how amazing and brilliant you are for even asking the question.
Yeah.
Have you ever found yourself like thanking them, or like there's like articles where people are like, they start getting friendly with their Geminis and like, oh, thanks so much for your feedback, or oh, you're so nice.
It does better if you're not nice. If I gotta not take that behavior into real life, but with the AI, the more blunt I am on what I wanted and said, look here and see how you didn't fulfill that request. And it says, I'm sorry. And it gets sheepish and it does better the next time. That's probably just in my head, but I think the more blunt and sharp I am with it, the better the behavior aligns. And I think there's been some studies on to that effect too. So not that you got to be mean. It's just be direct.
Well, and tell it to be specific. Like, don't give me the exact answer, and if you don't have it, then don't tell me, because that's one of the it's one of the issues that AI has is it's trying to please you, and to kind of Joe's point, if you're not direct with it, it can be kind of fuzzy and warm, because it's supposed to be out of the box. But to Joe's point, if you get really direct with it and you ask for specifics, no, I want an exact answer. And then if it comes back and says, I don't have that information, that's fine. It doesn't have it. Okay. That's fine.
I had a scenario where I was running into some issues with Claude Code, just not building things out in the way that we kind of described. And so I was back, and I think actually at this time I was using Claude Chat, not Chat GPT. But I'm there in Claude, and I'm just like, hey, this isn't happening this way, whatever, and I'm trying to get some prompts. Claude generates this just aggressive prompt to put into Claude Code. I mean, like all caps, and it was like, you will stop right now. And I was like, whoa, very effective, however.
I think a lot of it does come down to it's the prompting, but if you think about it, as if you were giving a human instructions, they need the context, what the deliverable is going to be like. Do you need it in an Excel sheet or do you need it in a document? So kind of like if we're thinking about AI, like our day-to-day AI use and how we'd use it in the workplace, and just knowing and speaking with people in the healthcare space, there's been a lot of like mixed opinions based on like who you talk to. So I'm wondering, what are the biggest misconceptions that you think that healthcare leaders have right now, and just folks that you talk to in general? Joe, I'll start with you.
The biggest misconceptions that healthcare leaders have right now, there is certainly some trepidation around it, and more than I'd like to think. I think sometimes I surround myself with these kind of conversations where we're using the models and pushing them to their limits. But out in conferences and opportunities to sit with organizations that have this responsibility for patient care, direct responsibility, and don't necessarily have the resources to go experiment. It's still a new and somewhat intimidating or scary premise to AI. So, and not wanting to put any information out there, I think I've seen a little too often that the reaction is we need to just stop or put up not guardrails, but close the door and wait till we really have our arms around this and we really understand it and we know exactly where the data is going and how it's handled and how it's returned before we do anything. That the misconception that we can put a box on this for now and open it later is not doing any favors for those organizations. And so I encourage them. In fact, Medcurity, we do the risk assessments, right? And I'm telling these organizations that the bigger risk right now, the biggest risk is not learning about this. You don't have to embrace it in every workflow yet, but if you stand still and you're not doing at least ambient scribe or something that gives some power to your providers, it's going to be really hard to recruit providers next year. You're going to fall behind so quickly if you don't keep up with this. It's moving too quickly. You can't keep up with everything, but you also can't just stop and wait on the sidelines. There's too much to learn. There's too much evolving right now. So just in a short summary of that, I think there is this immediate reaction to just say, let's just wait, let's learn, let's study it, and start doing something once we really understand. There's not time for that. And there's ways we can, I'm sure we'll get into, there's ways that you can push into this right now safely and learn and get off the sidelines.
What about you, Brandon?
Yeah, so Joe, I'll dovetail into what you're talking about. I think one of the biggest misconceptions, beyond just sticking your head in the sand and waiting, as you're talking about, right? Like it's honestly that it's easy. So, when you use ChatGPT, use Gemini, use Cloud, it's easy as a consumer. Like, and it's actually very effective for what it's doing. Like, it's kind of blows your mind. But to actually implement something that is patient facing, that's outward facing, even employee facing, it's work. It's no joke. Like, we do this stuff. We have an entire platform on the back end that, you plug in whichever, AI you want to do, and you can see the responses it gets, and you can provide feedback in that platform. You can even lock in particular answers or change them so that that's the answer for that intent. And so what I'm saying by that is you have to do things like that as an organization, or you have to partner with people that already know how to do this.
Brandon, that is a misconception I have daily, is that it's so magical that it surprises me when there are, use cases, especially in healthcare, that have to be consistently true and solid and dependable. And then you realize the work that still needs to go into this to make that happen, the kind of things that you do in your world.
Yeah.
And it takes, sometimes it seems so magical because of our limited use cases. And you're right. There's a lot to get our arms around.
Well, and the other thing is, if you think about it, one of the biggest Pandora's box issue is the AI the group will put out a new version, and everything you knew before, something's changed. Where did it change? What changed? How do you audit against that? And so to me those are the misconceptions of, you have to address that from the jump. Otherwise, everything you're building is going to, people are going to lose confidence in it. And that's where we're seeing a lot of the fundamental issues at the executive level where it's working one day and then the next day it's not doing what it did before and now they're scared of it. And to your point, then they're mothballing it going, let's wait till, someone else figures it out and then we'll do what they do. And that's just it's not the right mindset.
Well, and as time goes on and all of them get more and more advanced, it's a lot easier if you start small and start
Yep.
now than wait and then dive into agents.
That's
Agents,
exactly right.
you got
Yeah,
to take those baby steps and really learn. And as you're learning at the speed of change, it's always
yep,
good to keep on top of that. What are
100%.
your thoughts on that, Tim?
Yeah, no, I would agree with Brandon and Joe. And I think there's sort of two camps and opposite ends of the spectrum that I run into. And it's kind of that one camp that they touched on where it's, they really just want to be on the sidelines, or it's even, more so like head in the sand. They're like, this whole AI thing, it's a fad, it's going
Hmm.
away. Like large language models are never going to do whatever, and that's really scary. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, I've come into folks that kind of view AI as sort of this just magic box, right? And they're like, we're just going to dump all of our patient information in there, and like now we can query it and have all of our questions answered, right? And obviously that isn't going to work. And so, some of my conversations and encouraging people is really before they're even jumping into AI, just organizationally, really just understanding your processes, right?
Yep.
Understand how you're doing what you're doing, why you're doing it. You document that, then you've given a roadmap for AI. And that's where I see it becoming super powerful, at least within our organization.
Yeah.
Um,
And we
well, we're
kind of hit this
seeing it.
point a couple times. I think we hit this point, but there's a lot of times that someone will say, hey, 6 months ago, they tried it. So recently they tried something and it didn't work. And so it doesn't
Yep.
work on the negative side. And we, at this point, if you tried it 3 months ago and it wasn't great, try it again, right? Don't think AI based on what we tried 3 months ago. But also, again, to Tim's point, once you try it, you understand how much goes into sometimes just the last mile. It can do excellent
Hmm.
code for you, and it's 80% of the way there, and then you troubleshoot those last two issues for 3 days, right? So yeah, this is a good. I think both those points
Yeah.
are really clear in the market right now.
Well, and Tim's point about identifying your processes and finding the low-hanging fruit that you can use AI with is key, right? Because at the end of the day, if you can formalize a process, you can implement AI with it, and you can get rid of a lot of the, mundane tasks and things along those lines. But you got to know what you're solving for first.
When you go to a conference and you're seeing all the different booths and you hear a lot of people talking about it, what parts of the AI do you think is more theater, and where would you say it's delivering ROI most in healthcare?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the ambient scribing is one that's absolutely providing value, and the most of the leadership of hospitals and clinics that have put that type of ambient dictation in place say they'll never go back. They say go find the funds for it if you haven't implemented it yet. Providers are finishing their documentation during the workday. They're saving multiple hours a night of documentation. And it's just better care for the patients to have the information there, fresh, complete. So it's an obvious one, but we're seeing demos of tools that have a really high. Their marketing is very AI centric, right? And then you get into it, and those workflows are pretty new and aren't necessarily magical yet to what we were talking about. So I think there's a lot of marketing language around just the chat function, right? So getting a little deeper into the products that say they're AI first. My big thesis here that everybody is saying, this is not just my words, but software has historically helped us do the work. Software going forward needs to do the work for us. And I think a lot of AI speaking or AI companies are still in the help you do the work function. And we really want to see that shift to where it can go out, it can do more of the work for you. It can represent you as we're all seeing right now. So that gap there is probably the filter I use right now looking at companies. Are you just supporting me and doing my same job, but you bring a little more information along the way? Or are you actually taking some of this repeatable work off my plate and letting us run faster into the mountains of extra work we'd like to get done every day?
Joe, along those lines, and I'm going to jump in with like a little PSA for everyone watching. I'm curious if you guys have seen this at conferences. one of my biggest pet peeves right now is organizations that are popping up and effectively they're just doing a wrapper around ChatGPT, a wrapper around whatever,
Yep.
and they're marketing this product as being phenomenal. And all it's doing is just, submitting a prompt, right? And then they're spitting it back. And
Yep.
they, maybe did that in a HIPAA compliant, hopefully did that in a HIPAA compliant environment, right? So it kills me. Companies that are because they don't understand. So they're going in, they're paying thousands and thousands of dollars for a product that's $20 a month. So do your research before you dive into something right now for an external AI product.
I dovetail onto both of what you guys are saying is, it's frustrating for us as a, human emulation company that's been at this for a long time and really understand you can't just build it on top of the AI to your point, Tim. Meaning if you're on that model, it's already kind of flawed, right? You're going to struggle to control it. It's going to do things that you didn't know it was going to do. It's going out to the internet to get stuff. You don't know what it's doing with patient data. And so it's that there's a lot of snake oil out there right now because basically everyone has to say they're using AI or they're an AI company. It just is, with the new tech. But, so that's a problem. One of the other pieces that at least I'm hearing, we're not involved in it as much, but it's diagnostic type technology with AI. I think there's some issues there, and there's some potential problematic pieces because you really do need a human in the loop on those types of things. And so, I think that's an area that's still, going to take some time, right, to develop. And then to Joe's point, the conversational aspect of the chat bots and those kind of things is still based on legacy technology where it was built to get you to a human and the right human as fast as possible. And that's not all that efficient or effective, right? I also, one of the things that we see that we think that has a great area for improvement is both in disease management and compliance for the patient, meaning, being able to understand what that process is and what their particular circumstance is and have patient feedback come back to it and be able to have decision trees around, well, this means you do need to see a doctor and we may need to change your medication. Like understanding those, turns based on patient feedback as they go, as well as adherence, right? So if you're supposed to do something 3 times a day, it should be reminding you and should be a personal assistant to help you with that. And it should also report on if you missed it or didn't do it. And there should be that feedback loop that it should be supplying, which right now we don't see that as being something that anyone's has effectively solved in healthcare. But pretty simple and pretty easy low-hanging fruit from our perspective, right? It's not easy to do, but from an AI perspective, that's a really good use case that we don't see being implemented yet. Think of like post-op type care and things, because they send us home nowadays like practically from the table to to your couch. It's like, you have to deal with all that stuff, and we're not all great healthcare providers, right?
What does that look like on your in your vision as you lay it out? Are they on their phone post-op? They've got effectively an avatar. They've got someone they're having a conversation with on a regular basis. Is it proactively reaching out to them? What does a day look like for somebody that has that technology?
Yeah, so that's how we would view it, right? Is you have a human that's your subject matter expert that if they were in your home, what would they be doing as a care provider? But you can digitize that and you can put that process in place, and you can also have that feedback loop that if for whatever reason, if they say, well, my temperature went up to 102, there would be decision matrices in this that say that means you need to call the provider, or it should alert the provider for them to reach out and check in. I think there's a lot of ways to do things that you could make it way more efficient for, post-op or disease management. And it's capable of doing that, but it's not capable as just the AI. AI is just generative for language and those kind of things. You have to have a process flow behind it, rules engines, conversational engines, a lot of other technologies got to go behind that to make that effective. And that's where from my perspective, that's going to be a challenge for the healthcare providers to build. I think it's got to be, done by vendors and the industry to solve that problem.
It's a huge opportunity, big problem to solve. I know it's what you're working on, Brandon. It's exciting. It's interesting. Everything we talk about so far and going forward, it's one of those things that a lot of work goes into it. A lot of work is needed to get it right 100% of the time, which is the trick here. And even in basic policy analysis, things we do, 95% out of the box is not going to cut it when it's regulatory or when it's healthcare delivery.
Nope.
But you put all this work into it, and it's going to be beautiful, and then it's going to just seem magical, and people will see it and they'll use it and they'll say, yeah, of course it talks to me and it knows everything. The outcome is going to be so magically simple, but I think we get to see how much it still takes to do that right, and to do it right every time.
Well, and so Joe, on our back end, we pre-populate it with basically approved content, and you can actually see, we take away the black box, right? So you can look at what the answers are going to be based on the intents and the prompts. And as people ask more questions and put more in, we keep that history, and you can go in and review those, and they're auditable, right? And if that intent's not right, you can adjust it, and then the system is learning from those adjustments, but it's learning it specific to those intents. And then we also can take and put different AIs, plug in different AIs and see how the answers changed, and actually use an assessment to see what's the percentage they change. And maybe you like those answers better, or maybe you don't. And maybe for these particular sets of questions, whether it's formulas or whatever, you want to use this type of AI for it. And that's just, I think that's where you're going to see the trends go towards as this industry matures, right? And specifically in healthcare. But you got to have an audit trail. And you got to have people be able to look at what the answers are and show people what the answers are and where it navigates to and what it did and what it's doing and who did it, right? Like you know that stuff from the compliance side of it. And right now, if you use, Chat GPT or whatever, those kind of things, you have to dig through all that mess. Yeah. And then you don't know, so it changes the answers because it's supposed to be human, right? And sometimes it changes it to material. And now you got a problem.
Yep.
Well, Brandon, to your point with the system you're designing, the only information it's pulling is coming from the database that you're presenting it, right? That's one of the biggest things there's a misconception I think that often happens is
good point.
You effectively are using your AI as just a language model, like it's just able to articulate back in a meaningful way, right? But the information you have completely controlled. Whereas if you send that to ChatGPT without that database, then it's just pulling on whatever information it has. And given it was trained on everything, it will have been trained on things that are not accurate, right?
That's right. And the other side of it is with this type of back end, the other piece of it is we have to hit a certain percentage of context. And what I mean by that is if we get a hit and we don't really know, we're going to ask questions back to clarify until we've got like, say, 3 points of context. Then we know the intent, and then we'll go down that dialogue area. We can switch out of it, but without knowing the intent, right now the current models primarily, they may ask a question at the end, but it's more like, was that helpful? We'll go, are you asking about this or that? Which is super important, especially if you're talking about something clinical or medical or whatever, to really find out what they're actually asking about. And by the way, if that's not in our knowledge base, we don't know, and we're not going to answer. We're going to say that I'm not trained on that. Now that feedback loop can go back to a human to either say, let's train it on that, or yeah, we don't want to talk about that. And it could be whatever approved answer you have of, we are this type of clinic or this type of medical group, and we don't have knowledge about that type of thing, right? So it keeps we call it keep it on the rails, right? Basically the guardrails.
Yeah, you're taking something that's nature is autocomplete. Its origin is autocomplete.
It's got to answer. Yeah.
And those keeping it on the rails is saying what would a human do in that situation? We get more context.
What would your subject matter expert do, right? They ask questions like you. Yeah. I've never gone into somebody that really knows what they're doing without them asking me a half dozen questions before they start giving me any kind of answers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so with your audit trails and your confidence scores, effectively your users are helping to train the model real time, right?
100%. Yep. And real time is a little bit, so there's guards and controls with the way we do it, which means there's user feedback that goes in positive, negative, and then recommendations for what it should do. And that feedback loops comes back currently in the model. Right now, we're helping implement that because we need to make sure that if we make any adjustments that everything shows up green lit when we made changes. Or did something now before it goes to production, now we can see did something else change and it bubbles it up to go, then those end users have to approve that or adjust that additional change. And that's critical, right? Because that's the black box that's happening right now. is, you make one change somewhere, or you change a prompt or whatever, and you don't know what else it changed. So we're actually using another AI on top of the one we have. They don't communicate together, which is super important because they'll corrupt each other, right? There's a lot of use cases about that where they're having these AIs talk to each other. We don't do that. We put the other one on top of it that literally is like, call it an auditor that's auditing the answers. And if something material changed, it bubbles up, send it to a user. The user can approve that, adjust it, and then to your point, put it back in a loop and then put it to production. So that way you always know what you're putting out and you've got a record of it. And so there is a, it's not that auto learning. Like we just don't do that.
Yeah.
And there's checks and balances that could be multiple users. It's whatever your process is, we can adhere to that from a compliance standpoint. And we deal with both, healthcare and finance, right? So those are super important for both fields.
So when thinking of these AI use cases in healthcare, and when people are wondering, hey, where should I start? What should I, if they're still in the very beginning, somebody said, hey, if I want to deploy AI in the next 6 months, like where would I start, and what would you tell them?
I think it's a critical question. I think it does change a bit by the makeup of the organization. Some of the health clinics we work with are very small, and some of the clinics and hospitals have a full IT team with resources available to really focus on this. And so the answer to that question scales a bit. We already talked about ambient scribing as one of the more obvious wins. Probably moving from that into other kind of big undertakings would be something like coding. It's actually extremely effective with medical coding already, but really maybe independent of the size of the organization. One of the points Tim made earlier, learning about those individual processes in your organization. And one of the CIOs of a large health center said he asks his workforce, what sucks about your job? What do you do that's tedious? What's the most mind-numbing things you do every day? And then make a list of that and start to triage that and say, all right, where can we put some workflows around this? What can we do just with the tools that already exist, our $20 a month plans, to help make these parts of the organization more efficient? I'll rewind for a second. Being the compliance arm, I need to say, of course, have a policy that enables innovation with guardrails. So figure out what we're going to allow with AI. It's really important because otherwise everybody's assuming they can't do anything or they can do anything. So just put those guardrails in place. Say we've got maybe a steering committee if you've got enough people to do that. Say, I like for the steering committee to be our early adopters. Who are the ones that are running ahead of the curve for you right now? And you say, hey, slow down. You're putting too much information out there, right? Don't just shut them down, pull them in and say, okay, let's bring your ideas here. Let's put them on a whiteboard. Let's sort them by maybe ease of implementation and knock out a few of these things. And again, if you've got a couple IT people on staff, you could very easily create some browser plugins that overlay to data that you're handling, like your EHR data. You can put something in with Copilot if you're under the Microsoft Business Associate Agreement with them. There's models you can use very quickly under BAAs that allow you to start experimenting with some of these ongoing repeatable processes. So combination of maybe the easiest wins, the vendors that are vetted and make the biggest difference to you, and some in-house process improvements. And then you start looking a little bit more on the frontier and say, where else can we really support our patients? What are new technologies we can start piloting? And almost for anything you pilot, try 2, 3 vendors, and give them sample data sets, or let them be in your environment a little bit to try to see that they really have something to offer you. It's not just smoke and mirrors yet. We have a lot of new vendors. Some of them are excellent, really pioneers, and some of them are just riding the I said AI bandwagon. And so we really do like to see some pilots and some head-to-head comparisons early on with these technologies. So bit of a rambling answer, but pick a few easy processes to learn on, get a couple proven technologies underway, and then start pressing into what's possible, what's next.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Joe. What we kind of see, Mel, it goes along with what Joe is saying, is a lot of AI projects and things right now goes back to kind of the common problem is, uh, you know, basically uh, tools for engineers built by engineers versus your actual users. And so at the executive level, I think the biggest key piece is listen to your people. what are the biggest challenges they're having day to day. Joe kind of hit on that, as well as your patients and, any people that are critical on a process perspective. What are their pain points? What's dragging them down? That's when we go in and talk with folks. The founder, Fred Brown, who's been at this for a long time, that's the first thing does is what pain are you having? Where's your pain points? Where's the friction? And so find out what the friction is and where it's painful for your employees, because the truth is there's probably some pretty simple things you can implement to make their lives a lot easier. So, but you got to figure that out first versus the engineers playing with it in a lab, saying it could do this cool whiz bang thing, and you're like, yeah, but I don't care about waffles. Like it doesn't do anything for me. Like, yeah, I can make waffles, but I don't want waffles, right? Like it's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of saying that that's one of the fundamental problems in the IT space. And I think it has to be at the executive level where they push that to go, no, we're going to focus on the users, the processes. What are our pain points? What are our people dealing with that is painful for them? And what are our patients dealing with that's painful for them? And then go find a vendor or a solution, but stick to solving that pain point because there are some really low-hanging fruit that just sitting there right now from what we're seeing.
And
Oh,
yeah, go ahead, Tim.
no, I was going to say, I mean, I agree with everything, Brennan and Joe are saying, but I would almost take for an organization thinking about getting into AI, I would almost take a step back from AI. And at the very beginning, what I would do, I think it can be really intimidating. If you're not familiar with it, things are moving so fast. You see so many things, being, kind of bombarded, oftentimes conflicting. You can just feel like this thing is a whole big world that like I've just missed the boat on. I can't get in it. So I think one of the first things I would say is to someone is, yes, it's a fast moving stream, but just jump into the rapids, right? You'll get swept along and you're going to kind of figure it out along the way. So to that end, I would say, if you're a healthcare provider and you're like, you know what, we got to get in with AI. I would think about that person in your organization that is obsessed with AI. That everyone has it, right? There's someone that comes in every lunch break, they're talking about AI and some cool thing, right? Take that person to lunch. Just pick their brain, ask them what they are excited about with AI. And then the other step to that, I think, is you just have to start using AI yourself. So get a $20 subscription, find a model. It doesn't really matter what it is, and go in there and just start talking. Say, hey, I've got this organization and I'm thinking about implementing AI. What could I do? Right. And I think that'll spark a conversation that you start to move through. That's going to give you information as to where you can go. And then my hope would be at that point, when you do start looking at vendors, you actually understand what it is they're talking about. You understand what it
Yeah,
is they're presenting, and then you're making more informed decisions.
it's a good point.
So when picking out a vendor, what are the key considerations that a chief information officer or anyone making those decisions? What would you advise?
We're going to say from a compliance perspective, obviously the business associate agreement is an important quick step. So it seems kind of obvious at this point when we've had HIPAA around for 20 some years. But some of these new companies that are popping up quickly, they're pushing into healthcare a bit without maybe necessarily understanding the compliance side. And it, again, sounds kind of obvious, but the thing is, when you have those individuals, you should take them to lunch, learn from them, equip them, let them pull you into the future. But certainly have those conversations early on about what tools are okay to use. What I'm seeing in the field sometimes are providers that didn't get the tool through the organization yet, so they just signed up for either a trial or started using it, put it on their own credit card. It's so life-changingly effective, some of these tools. They're so powerful. And if you hate typing on a keyboard, it's just keyboard liberation and they love it. But they are putting those tools in place quickly on their own. And you find it in the browser running. They're recording patients. You don't have the patient consent yet. They're using AI to process those notes. You don't have a BAA with the model yet. So I think wrapping your arms around a process to vet these vendors. We still want to be able to adopt new vendors. We don't want to say, you've only been around 2 years, we're not interested. That's going to hamstring your organization. You've got to look at what's coming out right now. There's going to be disruptors, and you want to take the time and give them at least some consideration on it. So yeah, vetting vendors would be, are they at least set up? Can they sign a business associate agreement and then have them walk you through where the data flows? Well, ask those questions, those basic questions. What models do you use? Does it say is the data going to your servers? Is it going out to some model that you've put a wrapper around? start tracking the data. A couple basic places probably to start with those vendors.
Yeah.
Oh,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
I was gonna say, I think you hit on this earlier, but there's such a world of difference between developers that are developing products for the medical industry versus someone from that industry developing a product to meet a solution. So I'm always, when it comes to vendors, I always want to know, where they came from, who's developing this, what is that background? Because that'll be really telling.
Yeah, that's great points. And I dovetail also into what Joe's talking about. That's kind of the front end of it. The second piece of it is, I think, two things. One is you need to invest with someone. You got to partner. If you're going to use a vendor, you got to view them as a partner and not just a vendor, because it's not, this is not simple stuff. It's a journey. And I think pilots are super important based on a specific use case. So you don't want to solve the world's problems day one with AI, because you can't. But if you have a very specific use case that you want to apply it to, and you can do a pilot with it, with kind of a journey, like a three-step process, that's a good approach from at least our perspective. But if you just are trying to buy like a piece of software or something like that, it better have a very specific use case that solves a thing. But trying to leverage AI in a broader sense, I think it's more of a partner journey than it is right now, because it's evolving so quickly. You can't just solve the problem. So solve a specific use case and then find another use case, another use case. That's how I think about it.
100%. We're seeing a pickup in the forward deployed engineers, right?
Yeah.
Where
Yep.
if you're implementing a product, they've got to put engineers alongside, understand your process and fine tune it. We're just in those early days of how this works, and we don't necessarily want to change. We're not necessarily benefiting from changing our workflows, our clinical
Yeah.
workflows to match an AI solution. So we want those forward deployed engineers. We
Yeah.
want the vendor to come alongside us. I love how you said that, Brandon. We want them to partner with us, because it's got to take what we're doing and make it more efficient, more accurate, better, but not. We can't let something so new change how we deliver care. It doesn't have to. It just
Right.
just empower us how to deliver care in a maybe a more efficient, more accurate way.
Yep. Exactly.
Tim, is there anything you would want to add to that?
No, I agree with.
Yeah.
No, you covered all the things, I think.
Yeah, I mean, how many of you have met somebody who has discovered AI, has been using it to solve a problem or a use case, and go, nah, I don't want to use it anymore. It's not good. I think most people using it to solve a problem, it's game changing, or life
Mhm.
changing, I guess.
No, that's our competitive advantage. I want all of our competitors to have read the one story about the one time an attorney used AI and it didn't work and he got in trouble, in 2024, and so they're not really using it yet. That's awesome. But for our clinics and hospitals, yeah, try it again. Revisit it. It's just insanely better than it was 6 months ago. These
Yeah.
labs that are taking us into the future are doing incredible things, and as Tim said earlier, it's not too late. There's no way you should be on the sidelines. Jump into the current and just start learning what's
Yeah.
happening today.
Yeah, I liken it back to the cloud days, right, Joe? Same thing, where everyone was scared of it, didn't want to use it. And the ones that did were able to be early movers and take advantage of it, and made some leaps and bounds. And that AI is the same type of wave.
Actually, Mel, did
Yeah.
you want to take us into that cloud topic a little bit too? I think that'd be interesting.
So a lot of folks in healthcare, they talk about on-prem, off-prem, and would you say that healthcare should run AI in the cloud or move towards on-prem compute like DGX Spark?
Tim, what do you think? You got a Spark? I know you
I
do.
have a Spark, but firmly in the cloud, just for security purposes, and then also just access to GPU. So I have the DGX Spark. It doesn't. I mean, it can crunch some stuff, right? But it doesn't compare to anything I'm doing, with cloud computing GPUs. So I think you get ease of use, you get ease of security, and you get speed. So it's kind of a no-brainer.
Brandon?
Yeah, full disclosure, I'm clearly a cloud first guy, being in, previous lives in cloud, public cloud optimization and cost control and all that. What we've always said is, if you're on-prem, if you think on-prem is less expensive than your public cloud, you're not using public cloud correctly. And not only from an expense perspective, but a security perspective. And I think just as fast, kind of to Tim's point, just as fast as AI is moving, so is the infrastructure. And so, you're not going to be able to keep up with that, right? And I could get somebody having their own little test dev playground, maybe to to play with some stuff. But even then, we would be cloud first from our perspective, just because that environment's so much easier to use. And, who knows what some of the next generation stuff is, the services that they release, and even different tools that you can integrate. So I'm a cloud first guy.
It's a hot topic, and I appreciate both those perspectives. I think that it's a really powerful point that it's changing too quickly. And if you invest in some hardware, it's like jumping into the current of the river, moving quickly, like Tim said, and you're trying to build a campfire in a tent over here. It's gone. There's no point in making that investment, especially absolutely run your own models if you've got some resources to do that, right? Try it out. Like you can do Mimi or do one of the powerful models that are open source, but you can do that in an AWS environment that pivots with you or grows with you. So if you're getting really technical, you're setting up your own environments, that doesn't restrict you back to on-prem. So yeah, I was curious if either of you had seen any benefit, acceleration or speed, or just being able to have your own controlled environment. You can do more there, but it doesn't. Maybe another way to look at this is, do we use the big models, or do we really learn open source because we want it to be trained on our own data in our four walls? Is there any thoughts on that so far? Should we just kind of keep up on the latest open source so we have more control and power with our own data? Or even there, should we be using the broader models and just finding ways to provide context out of our data? Any thoughts on that yet? This is what we're all learning right now, right?
Yeah. I'd have to actually defer to my technical guys on that, because they have their particular opinions on that, and it would a lot of that would come down to functionality, security, and use case, right? Right now we're using the broader models just in general, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there could be a hybrid answer to that.
We've talked about the open source at some point related to scale, right? Because depending on the use case, you might use that because you've got something that doesn't need the latest and greatest. You could use an older model, for an example, specific language generation.
I want my agents to decide. I want them to use Sonnet or free open source and fall back to Opus if they have a tough question, right?
Yeah, if I need calculation, or if I need a specific use case, I'm going to use this particular one for that, right? Kind of making a game time decision at runtime depending on the use case. That's kind of how I think that hybrid role, I think that's definitely a possible solution, but a little early days.
Anything you want to add to that, Tim? What's your thought?
No, I have nothing to add to that.
All right, let's switch over to talking about AI governance and what that means in practice in healthcare. We talk about strategy and implementation, and now let's move on to safety and liability. What does good AI governance actually mean to you in practice?
I'll just restate, real briefly, the need for a policy. And for our Medcurity customers, we've got a great running start at that, but just to have a clear outlining of what's a safe playground and where to draw the lines. And then we've got to evolve it. I think a lot of the language and what I've seen in current policies, a lot of the assumptions right now is that this will always be human in loop, human assisted. It's critical that it's human in the loop and human assisted right now. That's not necessarily going to be true in 2 years in a lot of these functions. And not everybody wants to hear that, but we've got to build governance in a way that it evolves with the model's capabilities. And just again, bluntly on this, I think that human in the loop will be a limiting factor that actually brings more air. And it may be a good parallel as self-driving cars, right? They want to have your hands near the steering wheel. They want to have your eyes on the road. But at a certain point, the self-driving cars reached a safety metric that was far out exceeding humans, right? So I just say that to say that the market or the environment is changing so quickly. So governance needs to be in place now in a way to allow things to happen with guardrails and not restrict. But then you need a real attention, a real cadence of ongoing review of that framework or that plan that you made, at least quarterly with the committee, and revisit it. A lot of policies you set and forget for a decade. These policies need to adapt to what's available and not restrict you from changing what you do next year when it gets more capable, for putting more clinical care into AI-enabled workflows. So that'd be one consideration, I think, right now, is put something in that evolves with you and grows with you. This isn't one size fits all or something where you can set a policy and renew it in 3 years like usual.
Well, Joe, I think you hit on the fact that it's kind of an ongoing process, right? And that it has to be something that's entered into with intentionality, right? At kind of the onset. So I think that's sort of like it's spending the time, like when you're building out your frameworks of how things operate, already within your organization, you're doing the exact same thing with the governance, right? And you have to kind of continue to review that. Um, I think I kind of think of AI like right now as like just a giant rocket engine, right? Like it's massive, it's powerful, can do a lot, right? But also done wrong, it can absolutely blow up. And I think when you're coming to plan for what you're going to do with AI, you can really build that spaceship that rocket is going to propel, and you spend a lot of time and intentionality designing it. Or you can be someone that's like, hey, I'm just going to strap a lawn chair onto this thing and see what happens, right? um, spend the time up front, because that's what's going to give you the results you're looking for.
Yeah, I would dovetail into and agree with both of you. I think the trick is how do you adhere to the policy? And so, especially with AI, right? Like that, it's a black box currently. And so it's the validation of, okay, we've got a policy. Have we ingested that policy, and how does the AI understand those policies, and how do the people understand the policies related to the AI? So that's one of the pieces, because we deal on the compliance side of the actual what's the AI doing, how did it do, how do you audit against it, how do you show an examiner as an example, and how do you have comfort that it's doing what you've told it that it needs to do. And so I think that's going to be one of the big pieces for adoption is going to be validation. And kind of it's like the Wizard of Oz, right? You got to pull the curtain back and see how everything's actually operating to understand what's going on. And so I think that'll be a big part of kind of this next push in with AI for adoption is going to be the adherence to the policies that you created. How do you validate it?
I want to build on a human component of this point because, as you mentioned briefly, the human adoption of the policy too. Technical is going to get easier than the human side.
Yeah.
In some of the organizations that are really looking around the corner on this, they've already started reskilling activities, right? Reskilling work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big initiative from an HR perspective to look and partner with IT and say, okay, so our medical coding department, our dictation, our interpreters, areas that feel you can kind of justify for the short term and feel safe, but you can see what's coming from a technology standpoint is going to phase out a lot of the function of these jobs. There's so much more to be done in this in the healthcare space and really in a lot of roles. The work isn't done at the end of the day, right? So it's not that these people's work is just going to go away necessarily and there's nothing else for them to do. In a lot of cases, there's more for them to do. But some cases, it's just they need to look at this as, entering a new job market in a way, again, uncomfortable, but we're seeing this play out, right? So how do we upskill or reskill in a lot of cases, that workforce? Having a plan for that is really important when you're adopting policy because there is some human resistance that's happening in the ranks to AI technology. Again, maybe clinging to stories they heard or the one time they tried it, right? And if you have a back of your mind sense that this AI technology is going to replace your job, you might not be the forward adopter, really put into play. You're going to find all the problems with it and say, never mind, I'm going to do it the old way. I'm going back to pen and paper. I'm doing whatever tools I use today, right? So I think it is getting to be the point in time, and maybe this is bigger in 2027 and 2026, but we're getting close to where we need to have a transparent and talked about reskilling, upskilling plan for our team, just to ensure that they know what's next for them as more of their job gets chewed up by agents, by automation, and they're just watching their work get done and managing 10 agents or however that workflow works for them. So I want to hit that human point to be thinking about
good point.
What's next for the employees. And if they're bought into that, then they'll be bought into making the current technology uplift we need. They'll be bought into making that successful.
Yeah, Joe, I think that also goes back to, getting your employees involved in the feedback for what's difficult with their job. I think you could weave those two together, solve a problem for them that's easy, and then they get more comfortable with it, right? One way or another.
Yeah, if we take care of what sucks in their job, hopefully they'll be fans and they'll see that that's where we're focused.
Well, there's a flip side to that coin, Joe. I certainly think, for us as employers and just kind of in an industry, we certainly have a responsibility towards our employees. And I love the thought process of intentionality of like, how are we kind of like getting new skills, moving, adjusting, right? And so that first side of that coin is looking at the employee. The other side is AI is going to dramatically change the way organizationally we operate. It's not just an automation of what we do currently in a lot of ways, right? It's going to allow us to do things that we couldn't do before. And so I think as you're kind of looking to what you're going to do with regards to some of the employees you have, spending that time up front and really looking where is the organization going to go? Where are things going to shift? Because you're going to have emergent needs that you don't have right now. And if you've got some great folks already within the organization, they already know your organization, they're already trained, they want to stay there ideally, right? That's a lot better than trying to hire someone fresh. So I think when we can do that, that's sort of win-win for everyone all the way around.
But Tim, I already told our software engineers they need to take up plumbing or electrical, either one. So you're saying that there might be more things for them, new things for them to do. I love that perspective. I think, and I'm with you. I'm a techno optimist. This is going to create a lot more work. And you're right. Let's look ahead and not just reskill into other things that we know today. Let's reskill into what's coming that we can do that we weren't capable of tomorrow, and move people in that direction. I love that point.
With us working a little bit more in the, mental health space a little bit in some capacity, I'm, amazed as a clinician, for example, right? They have such a wealth of information available to them, yet let's look at, how they're paid. They're paid for the time that they're directly in front of the patient. They're not paid for the time that they're spent, analyzing that data. And really that's information that would help guide them when they're doing that face to face, right? So I love thinking about ways of like, holy cow, what if, AI can, it's not going to get it perfect, and that's fine, but it can take all of that information, kind of break down and compile it in a way that a therapist wishes they could do, but they simply don't have the time to do it. And that gets presented in front of them. Well, that's going to change the way that they're showing up in that face to face. So you've already done something that is just kind of a multiplier for the talent you already have within your organization. And I think it's going to be finding those things and repurposing. Those are the organizations that are really going to shine. And those are the ones that are just going to, they're paving the way with AI in the healthcare space.
Yeah, all of the different AI tools have just continue to improve. And like Joe mentioned earlier, that, if you tried one tool or maybe a year ago, it's completely different a year later. And just circling back to the tools maybe you doubted, how should leaders adapt and tell their team to adapt for the future?
I think it's probably along the lines of that last conversation. It is still an area we need to look at as leaders and pick first off, where's our organization headed? Where's our industry headed? Where's our organization headed? What do we want our company of the future to look like, or our clinic or our hospital? And then that does give, I think, a pathway for reskilling our employees, encouraging our employees. Don't hide this from them, obviously. Encourage them to learn, encourage them to take the time. That's a recurring message anytime I'm in front of people right now. So in the last couple of weeks, I've spoken to groups of students, I've spoken to the Air Force and different venues, and the messaging is we hit it in the beginning, go work with this, go play with this, get your hands on it, use it to create your menu for the week. Build a diet plan or a workout plan. Use it in different contexts, even if it's not natural for you yet. Learn how to talk to it. You'll take that right back into work, and you'll see opportunities to use this technology that other people haven't thought of because it's your role. And no matter what your role is, you want to be the one bringing the new technologies in. You want to be the nerd about this right now, because the ones that are sitting in a job and just doing the same job, I think, are a little bit more at risk than the ones coming in and saying, hey, let me help you transform the work I've been doing. And by the way, I'll go sit with some other departments and show them how to use these tools too. It is the way to career success today, whether you're just seeing the market or, just getting your first job out of high school, out of college, or you were close to retirement and you're realizing right now we're all at the beginning of our careers or the end of our careers. And if you think you're in the middle, you're at the end. Like, we all are learning new things right now. And someone said that on X, I stole it from someone, but that's I think a very good framing of the environment we're in right now.
And I think again, this is me stealing this from a TED Talk as well, but AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who knows how to use AI will. I think that's the thing to glom onto right there.
Yeah, and I think a key piece, Mel, is at the leadership level, it needs to be on the agenda for your meetings. And
Yeah.
what that means is if the leadership team can't effectively talk about AI in any meaningful way, you better add someone on your leadership team that can.
100%.
Because it needs to be, it is the Wild Wild West. It's
Yeah.
early days, so that means that you got to be having somebody on your team that understands it, willing to work with it, and then you've got to embrace it, but it's got to be part of the docket of which you're going, okay, and educating them. It's okay, right? To kind of Joe's point, how have we seen it being used effectively in our own area? Where is it not working? Why did it not work? What are our use cases? Those types of things, but having it as one of the items to say, this is going to be part of our culture. We're going to figure out how to adopt it. We're going to work at it. We're going to invest in it. But it's got to be, it's like anything, in my opinion, it's got to start at the top levels, and then that'll help the rest of the organization, adopt, right? And then the ones that don't want to, they're probably going to go somewhere else anyways, and so be it. Like that's just human nature.
Absolutely. This is a board level topic and it doesn't fall under technology, IT. It doesn't
No.
get lumped into that. It changes everything we do, how we, our clinical, our quality, every category that you might have your board watching. AI touches all that. So it should be a prominent topic, even at the board level and then down into
Yep.
executive leadership. And it's a great point, Brandon, because it needs to permeate the organization and it can't be, it's going to be bottom up. It's going to be top down to say, take the time, learn, dive into this, bottom up to say, here's a place that could probably start helping me.
Joe, you mentioned earlier forming a steering committee, and I love that. And I think it again, it's exactly what you're saying, and it's pulling people in and it's getting them engaged, getting them excited, which is really what you need right now.
Yeah, stakeholders. You got to have people with a vested interest in it one way or another.
Maybe one last question and then closing comments. So if you were to predict what healthcare workflows in the next 5 years, do you think that we're going fully autonomous, or what are your thoughts? Are we going fully autonomous in 5 years?
No, I don't think our patients are ready to walk into an empty building or necessarily only engage with their devices. I think a lot of what Brandon's doing will bring that closer because we can keep a human touch to it and we can make it comfortable for those that'll be slower to adopt. But I'll say that there are a good number of roles that will look dramatically different, and you might need one person where you needed 20 before. So there's going to be a major shift in the next 5 years, not in the next couple of decades, but certainly not to a point where care is completely detached from one human, right there with the other human. We're just gonna augment it. It's going to be what Tim said. We got providers that they don't have to do medicine by memory. They're going to have amazing augmentation to what they can do. We can do way more out in the patient's home than we can, way more care that goes into their life, wellness, all of that. I guess one more to be more succinct than I'm saying, there's so much more we could do in wellness and health right now. We're going to be able to tap into that and do a better job more than just take what we do today and automate it. That's not really the vision. There's so much more that we need to do for our patients and in every industry that we can now take this energy and this power that we have and tap into that and start doing more.
I agree. I agree with that. I don't see this becoming autonomous completely at all, but I do see certain workflows that are mundane and, typical becoming automated that don't have any liability associated with them. But anything that triggers a potential liability, you're going to have a human interject at that point. And again, that goes back to patient feedback, to, what Joe's talking about, more in-home care, post visit care, all those types of things. But there's got to be triggers that go to an expert at the right time. And a lot of that, in my opinion, is going to come down to liability. And when something is a potential liability, that needs to go to a human. I think that applies to mental health as well. Like in Tim's world, you're not going to have all that completely automated at any point, all the way through soup to nuts, even in 5 years. But it is going to dramatically change the user experience and in my opinion, the usability and more efficient and better usability.
We've had such a friendly conversation. We're all on the same page the whole way through. Tim, I dare you to take this last question and just be devil's advocate. Like, where are we wrong in our view here? Or we just nailed it.
Where can I poke some holes? Well, I think to your comment though, Brandon, that, there always, when liability is at stake, there's going to be a human in the loop, right? But I think there comes a point, and I think this is within the next 5 years, and Joe touched on this, where the human actually is the liability in that loop.
Could be.
I wish I could poke holes and say I disagree with both of you guys, but I'll take it a little bit further. I think AI is going to bring that human connection in the healthcare industry. I think it's going to bring it back. I think it's going to expand upon it. I'm talking like 1950s going to your doctor kind of scenario, right? Because our physicians are so burdened by paperwork, the liability concerns, all of the boxes that need to be checked. And I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. These are very important things that keep people safe and healthy. However, I think about our industry, we've got case managers working with a caseload, 20 individuals, right? 50% of their time is spent just on paperwork. They're reviewing things, they're using paperwork to generate more paperwork. So my belief is that within 5 years, all of that paperwork component is automated, is done better than what it's been done now. And now my staff have 50% more time to be directly in front of the folks they support and serve.
And there's no one that's going to be disappointed by that answer.
No, I was going to say that's a great way to end the conversation, because that's all positive. I think everyone wants that. Awesome. Well, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I'll just,
my one thought, I think we need to have a hackathon this weekend, Brandon. I think we could solve that solution you were talking about. We'll just put our heads together and we'll take care of that by Monday.
Yeah, there you go.
That's the pace we're running at. Tim and Brandon, thank you for taking time. The pace of everything we're doing is picked up. These are intense days. We have to, when you've got companies, you got to look at how they fit into the new world and adopt that quickly. And we've got customers counting on us to do so. So I thank you both for taking time to think through this with us. And thanks, Mel, for the leadership on the conversation. I'd love to do this again soon, because we talk again in a couple months. We'll have all new things to talk about.
100%. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. This is fun.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Medcurity podcast. And thanks Joe, Brandon, and Tim for sharing their insight today during our discussion. Stay secure, and we'll see you next week.